In the quiet hush of early morning in Jerusalem, before the sun crested the hills of Zion, there was a time when the streets echoed with prayers, the temple stood in golden glory, and the people of Judah lived with the hope of being God's chosen nation. But that chapter came to a brutal end. In 586 BCE, the armies of Babylon, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, swept through Jerusalem like a storm. The Temple of Solomon was destroyed, burning, collapsing into ash. The walls of the holy city crumbled. Families were torn from their homes, sacred treasures were carried away, and with it all, a nation was exiled. The Babylonian exile was not just a military defeat. It was a deep spiritual, emotional, and cultural wound. The people of Judah were forced to leave the promised land, a land given to them by God himself, and march hundreds of miles into a foreign empire filled with strange gods, alien customs, and unfamiliar tongues. Imagine the trauma. They lost their land, their king, and their temple, the three pillars of their national and religious identity. And yet, in exile, something remarkable began to happen. At first, many felt despair. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. Psalm 137. But gradually, the Jewish people began to ask, why did this happen? Did God abandon us? Are we still his people? Prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and later Daniel began to offer divine insight. The exile wasn't just punishment, it was discipline, a wake-up call to return to faithfulness. God had not forsaken them. Instead, he was reshaping them. In exile, without a temple to worship in, the Jewish people had to reimagine their spiritual life. And so, something powerful was born: the synagogue. These local gathering places became the new spiritual centers of Jewish life, where people studied scripture, prayed, and worshiped together. The Torah. With the temple gone, written law became central. The Torah was read, copied, studied, and revered. It became the anchor of identity. The Sabbath. The weekly rest day was no longer about land or harvests, but about God. The Sabbath became a reminder of who they were, even in a foreign land. Prayer and fasting. Without sacrifices, prayer took deeper meaning. It wasn't just ritual. It was the soul's cry in a distant land. Their identity began shifting from temple-based to text-based, from kingdom-centered to community-rooted. Faith became internal, portable, unbreakable. The exile produced some of the most powerful prophetic voices in the Bible. Ezekiel had visions of dry bones coming back to life, a symbol of national resurrection. Daniel, taken as a youth, rose to power in Babylon, yet never compromised his faith. Jeremiah, though left in Jerusalem, sent letters to the exiles saying, "Seek the peace of the city, build houses, plant gardens, for I know the plans I have for you." Jeremiah 29. These voices reminded the people, God is not bound by geography. He is with you, even in Babylon. Before the exile, many Jews believed being chosen by God meant safety, power, and privilege. But now they saw being chosen means responsibility, faithfulness, covenant loyalty, even in suffering. Their identity deepened. They were no longer just a nation with land and kings. They were a people of the word, a people of memory, a people of hope. They began to embrace the idea that they were a light to the nations, called not just to rule, but to witness. Even after the exile ended and some Jews returned to rebuild Jerusalem, the impact of Babylon never faded. It left deep imprints. Jewish life became diaspora-based, spread across the world but spiritually united. Scripture and synagogue remained central. Hope in a coming Messiah grew stronger. A deep longing for restoration of land, temple, and kingdom took root. Without Babylon, there would be no Judaism as we know it today, no synagogue worship, no Torah scrolls carried across nations, no Daniel or Esther stories of faithful living in exile. The exile broke the nation, yes, but it also refined it. The story of the Babylonian exile reminds us that faith is not tied to buildings or borders. God can work through suffering to purify and strengthen. Identity is not lost in exile. It can be rediscovered. Hope is not extinguished in darkness. It glows brighter. Even when everything falls apart, even when we are far from home, God is still writing the story. And so the Jewish people walked out of Babylon with no crown, no temple, and no land. But they carried something deeper, an unshakable identity, forged in fire, and a faith that would outlast empires.